Hey guys! So, nuclear submarines have long stirred the minds of Hollywood screenwriters. Just think of the action movie The Hunt for Red October or the 1960s series Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. These warships invariably appear as formidable instruments of geopolitical influence, silently gliding through the dark depths of the ocean on their top-secret missions. However, when the service life of such a submarine ends, it becomes a floating source of radioactive danger because it has hard-to-extract spent nuclear fuel on board. The naval forces that have nuclear submarines in their service have to exert tremendous efforts to dispose of this aging legacy of the Cold War. Thus, graveyards of nuclear submarines came into existence. They can be found off the North Pacific coast of the USA, beyond the Arctic Circle, and near the base of the Russian Pacific Fleet in Vladivostok. Until the mid-20th century, there were two types of power plants used in all submarines. Powerful diesel engines were used for surface navigation, and electric propulsion from battery banks was used for underwater navigation. Thus, the autonomy range of submarines was severely limited. Everything changed in 1954. That was the year when the USA built the world's first nuclear-powered submarine, the Nautilus. Soon after, just 3 years later, a nuclear-powered submarine appeared in the Soviet Union as well. Before the collapse of the USSR in 1991, 4 Soviet nuclear submarines sank due to various malfunctions and emergencies. They still rest on the seabed, posing a real threat to the entire world ocean. The K-8 submarine had issues with the reliability of the nuclear power plant. Over the 10 years of its operation since the launch in 1960, as a part of the 627A kit project, there were several emergencies on board. As a result, crew members received significant doses of radiation. However, on the fatal day of April 12, 1970, the submarine's demise was not caused by the nuclear reactor itself. In the spring of 1970, the USSR conducted one of its largest tactical naval exercises, Ocean 70. The K-8 submarine also took part in them. During the planned descent from a depth of 150 meters, a fire broke out in the hydroacoustic compartment due to a short circuit in the electrical equipment. The fire began to spread rapidly throughout the submarine, reaching the reactor compartment as well as other areas. The power plant personnel risked their own lives to extinguish the fire and prevent a nuclear disaster. The submarine resurfaced safely, and the evacuation of the crew began. However, an 8-point storm was raging in the Bay of Biscay at the time. Due to the rough sea and the damage caused to the submarine by the fire, it lost its stability. Despite the crew's best efforts to follow the orders of the Soviet military command and save the submarine at any cost, K-8 sank 4 days after the fire, along with Captain V. Besanov and 52 members of the crew. Currently, the submarine, along with its 2 nuclear reactors and 4 torpedoes with nuclear warheads, lies on the bottom of the Atlantic, 500 kilometers from the coast of Spain, at a depth of 4,680 meters. At present, humanity has no technical means to safely raise the dangerous nuclear remains of the K-8 submarine from the bottom of the Bay of Biscay. On Victory Day, May 9, 1983, the USSR launched the only submarine of Project 685 Plavnik, the K-278 Komsomolets. In the NATO classification, this Soviet nuclear submarine was known under the codename Mike. Soviet engineers used unique titanium alloys during the construction of the Komsomolets, thus making the submarine's hull particularly resistant to the high pressures of the ocean depths. It was the K-278 that set the record for the deepest descent for combat submarines. This record remains unbeaten to this day. In August 1985, the Komsomolets managed to dive to a depth of 1,027 meters and safely resurface. However, less than 4 years later, the record-breaking submarine would embark on its final combat mission. The K-278 sank in the Norwegian Sea on April 7, 1989. A fire broke out on board of the Comossolets when it was carrying out combat duty, moving at a speed of 8 knots at a depth of 380 meters. The cause of the fire hasn't been established to this day. All of the crew's attempts to extinguish it were unsuccessful. However, the submarine managed to surface. During this time, the fire intensified, turning from a local issue into a voluminous problem. The hull of the nuclear submarine began to tilt to the port and stern, after which the commander of the Comsomolets, Captain First Rank E. Vanin, gave the order for the crew to evacuate. Literally a few minutes later, the submarine completely lost stability and began to rapidly sink into the cold waters of the Norwegian Sea. 42 out of the 69 crew members perished, including the captain of the submarine. Currently, the Comsomolets rests at a depth of approximately 1.7 kilometers. The location of the sunken submarine is known to scientists and researchers. Both Norwegian and Russian specialists continuously monitor the radioactive isotopes contamination in the entire adjacent area of the Norwegian Sea. Recent studies have shown that although there is no immediate threat to Norway or the continental part of Russia, the radiation background on the seabed near the Komsomolets already exceeds permissible levels by 100,000 times. Besides the 4 Soviet nuclear submarines resting on the bottom of the world's oceans, there are also 2 American military submarines. The USS Thresher submarine sank in the spring of 1963 during naval exercises in the waters of the North Atlantic. The disaster resulted in the loss of 129 lives, including not only crew members, 112 submariners, but also 17 engineers, civilians. The remnants of the submarine lie at a depth of over 2.5 kilometers. However, the submarine's reactor was never discovered, despite attempts to search for it with various devices. Another American nuclear submarine, the USS Scorpion, sank along with its crew of 99 people on May 2, 1968, also in the Atlantic Ocean, during its return to Norfolk from the Mediterranean Sea. The cause of the sinking was the sudden collapse of the submarine's hull due to intense hydrostatic pressure. Most likely, one of the torpedoes exploded on board the submarine. The precise location of the Scorpion's remains, aside from the depth, which exceeds 3,000 meters, is still kept secret by the American authorities, as well as the condition of the submarine's reactor and nuclear arsenal. The danger posed by sunken nuclear submarines is very real. Each of them could potentially become a new Chernobyl in the world ocean, posing a real threat to the future of all biological life on planet Earth. However, it's not just the sunken nuclear submarines that pose a significant threat, but also the graveyards with their rusty remains. These submarine graveyards are rather different. The most contaminated and unsafe among them are located on the coast of the Kara Sea in northern Siberia. They essentially serve as nuclear waste dumps. Reactors dismantled from submarines and elements of spent fuel litter the seabed at a depth of 300 meters. Apparently, up until the early 1990s, Soviet sailors disposed of nuclear and diesel-electric submarines in this area by simply sinking them into the sea. The graveyard of diesel-electric submarines in Olena Bay in the northwest of the Kola Peninsula, in the Arctic part of Russia, looks surreal. It features rusty bow sections of submarines with exposed torpedo tubes, dilapidated combat compartments tilted at unnatural angles, and destroyed hulls. The Soviet Navy turned the Kara Sea into an aquarium full of radioactive waste. About 17,000 containers with radioactive waste, 16 nuclear reactors, and 5 whole nuclear submarines lie on the seabed. One of them has both reactors still filled with fuel. Currently, oil and gas companies are eyeing the Kara Sea region. If the protective casing of a reactor or fuel elements gets accidentally damaged in the process of drilling, it could cause radioactive contamination of fishing grounds. Official submarine graveyards are completely different. Some of them can even be found on Google Maps. by examining high-resolution satellite photos of the largest U.S. nuclear waste storage in Hanford, Washington, as well as storages in Seda Bay on the Kola Peninsula, or shipyards around Vladivostok, one can notice rows of steel containers each about 12 meters long. At Hanford, the containers awaiting burial are placed in long earth trenches. In the docks of Seda Bay, they are stored in neat rows, and in the Sea of Japan, they are moored at the Pavlovsk submarine base near Vladivostok. These containers, known as three-compartment units, are all that remains of hundreds of nuclear submarines. They are emptied of fuel and the reactor blocks are hermetically sealed during the decommissioning of submarines. This process was perfected at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard and Intermediate Maintenance Facility in Bremerton, Washington. It is a meticulous process. First, the decommissioned submarine is towed to a special dock where all liquids are drained from the reactor compartment, exposing the spent fuel assemblies. Then, each assembly is individually extracted from the reactor, placed in containers for spent fuel, and sent by rail for disposal at the long-term storage and fuel reprocessing plant. In the U.S., this facility is called the Naval Reactors Facility. It is located at the Idaho National Laboratory. In Russia, it is the Mayak Production Association in the Chelyabinsk region. After this procedure, no enriched uranium is left in the steam generators, pumps, valves, and reactor compartment pipelines. However, the metal from which they are made has become radioactive itself due to the decades of neutron bombardment. Therefore, after the fuel extraction, the submarine is taken to a dry dock, where the reactor compartment and the directly adjacent sections are cut out from the hull. Thick steel plugs are then welded onto the cut fragment. Thus, the three-compartment units are actually hermetically sealed segments of the submarine. All non-radioactive components of the submarine are disposed of separately. Russia is currently using this technology as well. Earlier, the West feared that due to less stringent requirements applied to the process of nuclear waste disposal inherited from the USSR, spent fuel could fall into the hands of terrorists. For instance, they still store spent fuel from 90 submarines decommissioned between the 1960s and 1970s in Andriva Bay near Seda Bay. In 2002, the G8 countries launched a 10-year, $20 billion program to transfer American nuclear waste disposal technologies to the Russian Federation. Thanks to this program, Russian waste disposal standards improved significantly. Fuel storage conditions were enhanced, and an onshore storage facility for decommissioned reactors was built. Using the methodology of three-compartment units, Russia has currently disposed of 120 Northern Fleet nuclear submarines and 75 Pacific Fleet submarines. The United States applied this technology to dispose of 125 submarines from the Cold War era. France also resorts to the three-compartment units technique. However, the Royal Navy's nuclear submarines of the United Kingdom are constructed in a way that allows the reactor module to be extracted from the hull, without cutting it along with the compartment. The reactor is removed together with its protective casing, placed in a container, and taken for storage. Nevertheless, it is still unclear when the UK is going to implement its plans to dispose of 12 decommissioned submarines, which are currently berthed at Devonport in southern England, as well as 7 more submarines kept in Rosyth, Scotland. The government hasn't yet decided which of the country's 5 existing facilities should store their reactors and spent fuel. However, the fact that safe disposal of nuclear submarines takes a long time and is very expensive does not seem to affect the military strategist's inclination to build new submarines. It seems that the U.S. Navy considers equipping submarines with nuclear power plants a very successful solution and has no intention of transitioning to alternative energy sources. The U.S. is not alone in its affection for nuclear-powered submarines. 4 such submarines are being built at Russian shipyards at Severodvinsk, with plans for the construction of 8 more similar vessels. Despite its limited budget, Russia is firmly committed to expanding its nuclear submarine fleet. China is doing the same. Therefore, it seems unlikely that the decommissioning of submarine graveyards and spent fuel storage facilities will happen anytime soon. Well, that's all for today, friends. Like the video if you found it interesting. Share your thoughts in the comments. Let me know, would you go into a submarine? I'm not sure about that myself. I think I'm a little too claustrophobic. Anyway, we'll see you next time.